Millionaire invited the janitor to his ex's wedding, but when she arrived, the bride's reaction shocked everyone. Before we begin, just know, no matter where you are in the world, I'm glad you're here. Maria Santos never expected her Tuesday morning to change everything. The 32-year-old single mother was quietly dusting the mahogany bookshelf in Richard Wellington's home office when she heard his voice behind her, unusually gentle and hesitant. "Maria, could you sit down for a moment? I need to speak with you." Her heart skipped. In the 3 years she'd worked as Mr. Wellington's housekeeper in his sprawling Connecticut mansion, he'd never asked her to sit in his office. The Italian leather chair felt foreign beneath her worn uniform as she clutched her cleaning cloth, watching the 55-year-old billionaire businessman pace behind his massive mahogany desk like a caged animal. "Sir, if I've done something wrong—" No, Richard interrupted, running his hand through his graying hair. His usual crisp business suit looked rumpled, as if he'd slept in it. "You've been exemplary. More than that, actually. You've brought warmth to this house that's been missing for years. When Sophia laughs in the kitchen while you're preparing lunch, this place feels alive again." Maria studied his face, noting the dark circles under his eyes. There was something different about Mr. Wellington today. The usual composed demeanor that commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals seemed fractured, vulnerable even. His dark eyes held an emotion she'd never seen before, fear mixed with determination. "Maria, I have an unusual request." He stopped pacing and faced her directly, his hands clasped behind his back. "This Saturday, my ex-fiancée, Victoria Sterling, is getting married. It's going to be the social event of the year. 500 guests. Cathedral ceremony at St. Patrick's, reception at the Ritz-Carlton. The mayor will be there, senators, half of Wall Street." Maria nodded slowly, unsure why he was telling her this. She knew about Miss Sterling from overheard phone conversations, and the occasional photograph still displayed in his study. Beautiful, elegant, everything Maria felt she wasn't. The kind of woman who belonged in magazine spreads and charity galas. "I received an invitation 3 months ago," Richard continued, his voice growing softer, more vulnerable. "And I want you to come with me. You and little Sophia." The cleaning cloth fell from Maria's hands, landing silently on the Persian rug. "Sir, I don't understand." "I know it sounds insane." Richard moved closer, his expression desperate and earnest. "But I need you there, Maria, both of you. I can't explain everything right now, but it's important. More important than you could possibly imagine." Maria's mind raced. A billionaire's ex-fiancée's wedding. Her 5-year-old daughter, Sophia, had never been to anything fancier than the McDonald's playground. "Mr. Wellington, people like us don't belong at—" "You belong wherever I say you belong," he said firmly. Then his voice gentled as he knelt beside her chair. "I'll take care of everything. Dresses from Fifth Avenue, professional hair and makeup, limousine transportation. All you have to do is say yes and trust me." Something in his tone made her heart flutter strangely. There was a desperation there, almost pleading. In 3 years, she'd never seen Richard Wellington ask anyone for anything. He was a man who gave orders and expected compliance, yet here he was, practically begging. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you want your housekeeper at such an important event?" Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at his manicured gardens, where Sophia often played while Maria worked. When he turned back, his eyes held secrets that seemed to weigh him down like stones. "Because some truths can only be revealed in the right moment, with the right witnesses," he said slowly, each word measured. "And because Victoria Sterling needs to see exactly who I've chosen to bring to her wedding. She needs to understand what she threw away." The way he said "chosen" sent chills down Maria's spine. This wasn't just about attending a wedding. This was about something much deeper, something that connected her to these people in ways she couldn't fathom. "What aren't you telling me, Mr. Wellington?" Richard's smile was both sad and determined, like a man preparing for battle. "Everything will become clear on Saturday, Maria. I promise you that, but right now I need you to trust me completely. Will you come?" Maria looked into the eyes of the man who'd given her stability when she had nothing, who'd treated her daughter with genuine kindness, who was now asking her to step into a world that felt impossibly distant from her modest life. "Yes," she heard herself say, her voice barely audible. "We'll come." Richard's relief was palpable, but behind it lurked something else, something that told Maria this wedding would change everything for all of them. What she didn't know was that her simple yes had just set in motion events that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her life. Thursday morning arrived with a flurry of activity that turned Maria's modest apartment upside down. She opened her door to find 3 elegantly dressed women standing in her hallway, led by a sophisticated blonde with kind eyes. "Mrs. Santos, I'm Catherine Mills, personal stylist. Mr. Wellington sent us." Within hours, Maria's living room became a luxury boutique. Gowns in midnight blue, emerald green, and classic black hung from portable racks. Sophia bounced excitedly between the makeshift fitting areas, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mama, look! Princess dresses!" Sophia squealed, running her tiny fingers along the silk fabrics. Catherine smiled warmly. "And we have something very special for you too, little princess." Maria felt overwhelmed watching the teamwork. These women treated her not like Richard's employee, but like someone genuinely important. The emerald dress Catherine selected hugged her curves perfectly, making her feel beautiful in a way she'd forgotten was possible. "Mr. Wellington has exquisite taste," Catherine murmured, adjusting the neckline. "He was very specific about the color, said it would bring out your eyes." Heat crept up Maria's neck. How had Richard noticed her eyes? As evening fell and the team packed up, Maria stood before her bedroom mirror in jeans and a sweater, but something had changed. The confidence from wearing that dress lingered, making her stand straighter. Sophia appeared in the doorway, yawning. "Mama, why is Mr. Richard taking us to the fancy party?" Maria pulled her daughter close, breathing in her strawberry shampoo scent. "I don't know, baby, but sometimes grown-ups have complicated reasons for things." "Ooh, do you think the bride will like us?" The innocent question sent a chill through Maria. What if this was all a mistake? What if she embarrassed Richard in front of all those important people? "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." But deep down, Maria suspected Saturday would bring answers she wasn't prepared to hear. Friday evening. Richard stood in his study, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch, staring at a photograph he'd kept hidden in his desk drawer for years. Victoria Sterling smiled back at him from the frame, young, radiant, taken during their engagement at the Hamptons house. His phone buzzed. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "Hello, Victoria." "Richard." Her voice was as smooth as he remembered, with that slight breathlessness that once made his heart race. "I wanted to call before tomorrow. I know this might be awkward for you." "Congratulations on your wedding," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Thank you. I heard you're bringing a guest." Richard smiled grimly. Society gossip traveled faster than wildfire in their circles. "Yes, 2 guests, actually." A pause. "Richard, if this is some kind of what, Victoria? Attempt to win you back? Make a scene?" His voice hardened. "You know me better than that." "I thought I did," she whispered, "until you chose your principles over me." Richard closed his eyes, remembering their final fight 3 years ago. Victoria demanding he fire Maria for inappropriate behavior, her jealousy disguised as concern for propriety. His refusal to destroy an innocent woman's livelihood. Victoria's ultimatum. Choose, Richard, her or me. He'd chosen Maria's dignity over Victoria's insecurity. I made the right choice then, he said quietly, and I'm making the right choice now. Who is she, Richard? This woman you're bringing? Richard opened his desk drawer wider, revealing other photographs, Sophia's kindergarten graduation, Maria laughing in the kitchen, both of them decorating Christmas cookies. Moments of genuine joy that filled the empty spaces Victoria had left behind. Someone who understands the value of loyalty, he said. Someone who knows what it means to fight for the people you care about. I see. Victoria's voice turned cold. Well, I suppose I'll meet her tomorrow. Yes, Richard replied, setting down his glass with a decisive clink. You will. After she hung up, Richard studied the old engagement photo one more time before sliding it back into the drawer. Some chapters needed to close before new ones could begin. Tomorrow, Victoria would finally understand what she'd lost when she forced him to choose. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, but Maria's hands shook as she applied the lipstick Catherine had left for her. The emerald dress felt like armor and vulnerability simultaneously. Sophia twirled in her powder blue dress, complete with sparkly shoes that made her feel like Cinderella. Mama, do I look pretty? You look absolutely beautiful, baby. Maria knelt to adjust Sophia's tiny pearl necklace, another gift from Richard. Remember what we practiced? Stay close to Mama, and... The doorbell rang. Maria's heart hammered as she opened it to find Richard standing there in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo. For a moment neither spoke. Maria, he breathed, his eyes widening with genuine admiration. You look stunning. Heat flooded her cheeks. In 3 years he'd never looked at her like that, like she was a woman, not just his employee. Mr. Richard! Sophia launched herself at him, and he caught her with a laugh, spinning her around. Princess Sophia, are you ready for our adventure? During the limousine ride to Manhattan, Maria noticed Richard's growing tension. His jaw was set, his hands clenched. Whatever this was about, it meant everything to him. Mr. Wellington, she said softly, if you've changed your mind. No. His voice was firm. I need you there, Maria. Both of you. He looked at Sophia, who was pressed against the window watching the city skyline. Some truths can only be told with the right witnesses. As St. Patrick's Cathedral came into view, Maria's chest tightened. Photographers lined the steps, capturing the arrival of New York's elite. Bentleys and Rolls-Royces dropped off guests, dripping in diamonds and designer gowns. I don't belong here, Maria whispered. Richard turned to her, his eyes intense. Maria Santos, you belong wherever I say you belong, and today you belong by my side. The limousine stopped. Through the window, Maria could see the whispers starting as people noticed their arrival. Camera flashes began popping. Richard stepped out first, then turned to help her from the car. As she emerged, a collective gasp rippled through the waiting crowd. Who is she? Someone whispered. Richard Wellington's bringing his housekeeper. And a child? Maria's cheeks burned, but Richard's steady hand on her back kept her moving forward. Sophia gripped her other hand tightly, overwhelmed by the attention. As they climbed the cathedral steps, Maria caught sight of a woman in white through the massive doors. Victoria Sterling, preparing for the most important day of her life. What she didn't know was that her wedding was about to become something entirely different. The cathedral's soaring arches and stained glass windows took Maria's breath away, but it was the sea of judgmental faces that made her want to disappear. 500 of New York's most powerful people turned to stare as Richard guided her down the center aisle. Sophia pressed closer to her mother, intimidated by the grandeur and whispered conversations following their progress. Richard Wellington brought his maid, someone hissed. How embarrassing for Victoria. What is he thinking? Richard seemed oblivious to the commentary, his head held high as he led them to a pew near the front, an area clearly reserved for family and closest friends. Maria's discomfort multiplied. "Sir, maybe we should sit in the back." "Absolutely not." His voice carried authority that silenced nearby whispers. "We sit where we belong." As they settled into the pew, Maria noticed the ornate wedding program in her hands. Victoria Elizabeth Sterling and Jonathan Matthew Hartwell. The groom's family was old money, railroad fortune stretching back generations. Organ music swelled and the processional began. Bridesmaids in blush pink floated down the aisle like perfectly choreographed butterflies. Then came Victoria. Maria's breath caught. Even she had to admit the bride was breathtaking in silk and Swarovski crystals, her veil trailing 12 feet behind her. But as Victoria's eyes swept the congregation, they stopped dead when they found Richard. The shock on Victoria's face was unmistakable. Her step faltered for just a moment before her practiced composure returned. But Maria saw it, the flash of confusion, hurt, and something that looked almost like recognition when Victoria's gaze shifted to her and Sophia. The ceremony proceeded with traditional pomp. But Maria felt undercurrents of tension flowing through the cathedral like electricity. Victoria kept glancing their way, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. During the vows, when Jonathan spoke of choosing love above all else, Richard's hand found Maria's on the pew between them. The gesture was brief but unmistakable, and Maria's heart raced at the contact. Several people in nearby pews noticed the touch, causing more whispers to ripple outward. When the priest announced, "You may kiss the bride," applause filled the cathedral, but Maria felt Richard's body tense beside her like a coiled spring. As the newly married couple walked back down the aisle, Victoria's eyes locked with Richard's. The look they shared lasted only seconds, but it contained years of history, love, betrayal, regret, and something else Maria couldn't identify. Then Victoria's gaze shifted to Sophia, who was clapping enthusiastically, completely innocent of the adult drama surrounding her. Victoria's face went white as a sheet. She stumbled slightly, and Jonathan reached out to steady her, concern creasing his features. "Darling, are you all right?" But Victoria couldn't look away from the little girl with dark curls and familiar eyes, eyes that looked remarkably like her own. The reception at the Ritz-Carlton ballroom buzzed with champagne-fueled conversation and the gentle strains of a string quartet. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory silk, each centerpiece a masterpiece of white orchids and roses. Maria felt like she was walking through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Every step across the marble floor drew stares. Every whispered conversation seemed to be about her presence there. Richard guided them to their assigned table, and Maria's heart sank when she saw the place cards. They were seated at table 2, the family table. Jonathan Hartwell's parents regarded them with barely concealed bewilderment. Richard, Jonathan's mother, Eleanor Hartwell, smiled tightly. "How unexpected to see you here, and with guests. Eleanor, allow me to introduce Maria Santos and her daughter Sophia." Richard's voice carried subtle warning. "They're very important to me." Sophia, oblivious to the tension, gazed in wonder at the elaborate place settings. "Mama, there are so many forks." Maria's cheeks burned as several people chuckled, but Richard knelt to Sophia's level with genuine warmth. "That's because they're serving many courses, Princess. Would you like me to show you which fork to use when?" As the evening progressed, Maria noticed Victoria watching them constantly from the head table. The bride barely touched her food, her eyes returning again and again to Sophia, with an expression that grew more strained with each passing moment. During the father-daughter dance, when Jonathan spun Victoria across the floor, her gaze found Richard. He stood near the edge of the dance floor, holding Sophia in his arms as she giggled and reached for the hanging crystals above them. That's when Victoria saw it clearly. The shape of Sophia's eyes, the curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she laughed. Features that were unmistakably familiar because Victoria saw them in her own mirror every morning. The music seemed to fade around Victoria as the truth hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled in Jonathan's arms, her face draining of all colour. "Victoria, what's wrong?" Jonathan stopped dancing, alarmed, but Victoria couldn't speak. She was staring at the little girl who had her eyes, her smile, her gestures, and who was calling another woman Mama. Across the room, Richard met Victoria's horrified gaze with a look of quiet satisfaction. He'd brought his witnesses all right. He'd brought the truth that Victoria had tried so hard to bury. Sophia wasn't just any child. Sophia was the daughter Victoria had given birth to 6 years ago and given up for adoption through a private agency. The pregnancy she'd hidden from everyone, including Richard, before disappearing to study abroad for a year. The daughter she'd convinced herself she'd never see again. The daughter who was now calling Richard Wellington's housekeeper Mama and looking at the man Victoria had lost like he was her whole world. Victoria's carefully constructed new life was about to crumble, and everyone in that ballroom was about to witness the most shocking revelation of the social season. Victoria Sterling Hartwell stood frozen on the dance floor, her wedding dress suddenly feeling like a straitjacket as the devastating truth crashed over her in waves. The elegant ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and perfect flower arrangements faded into background noise as her entire world tilted off its axis. "Victoria, darling." "You're trembling," Jonathan whispered urgently, his hands steady on her waist as other couples continued dancing around them. "What's happening? You look like you've seen a ghost." A ghost. If only it were that simple. Ghosts were ethereal things that haunted from the shadows. This was her flesh and blood, her baby girl. The daughter she'd carried for 9 months and then handed over to strangers because she wasn't ready to be a mother. The child she'd convinced herself would have a better life without her. "I need..." Victoria's voice came out as a rasp. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I need some air. Just give me a moment. Should I call the doctor?" "You're pale as..." "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "No doctors. I need to powder my nose. Wedding nerves, that's all." Jonathan's concerned expression didn't ease, but he nodded reluctantly. "Shall I escort you?" "No, please. Continue dancing. I'll be right back." Victoria practically fled toward the ladies' lounge, her 12-foot train catching on chair legs and the heels of other guests. Behind her, she could hear the whispered conversation starting up again. "Did you see the bride's face when she looked at that child? Something's definitely off. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Who is that woman with Richard anyway? And why does her daughter look so much like?" Victoria burst through the ornate doors of the ladies' lounge and collapsed onto the velvet settee, her carefully applied makeup smearing as tears threatened to fall. The mirror reflected a stranger, a woman in a designer wedding gown who looked utterly shattered. 6 years. It had been 6 years since she'd given birth to Sophia Elena Santos, though she'd named her something different then, Emma Victoria Sterling. She'd held her for exactly 17 minutes before the adoption coordinator gently took her away, promising that the adoptive family was perfect, loving, financially stable. They'd lied to her. Or maybe they'd told the truth and something had gone wrong, because her daughter, was being raised by Richard Wellington's housekeeper in circumstances far from the privileged life Victoria had envisioned when she signed those papers. The bathroom door opened and Eleanor Hartwell entered, her expression a mixture of concern and barely concealed irritation. "Victoria, dear, what on earth is going on out there? You've left your new husband standing on the dance floor like a fool, and people are starting to talk." "Mother Hartwell, Victoria struggled to find words that wouldn't completely destroy her new life. I'm not feeling well. Perhaps something I ate. Eleanor's sharp eyes narrowed. This has nothing to do with food, and we both know it. This has to do with Richard Wellington and his entourage. Really, Victoria, inviting your ex-fiancé was questionable enough, but whatever game you two are playing, it's not a game, Victoria whispered, her voice breaking. Oh God, Eleanor, it's not a game at all. She looked up at her new mother-in-law, this woman who prided herself on knowing everyone's business in their social circle, who traded gossip like currency at charity luncheons. How could she possibly explain that the little girl sitting innocently at table 2 was her granddaughter? That Victoria had lied to everyone about her year abroad, had given birth in secret, had given away the Hartwell heir before they even knew she existed? Whatever this is about, Eleanor said sternly, you need to compose yourself immediately. You have 300 guests out there who came to celebrate your marriage to my son. You will not embarrass this family or ruin this day because of some dramatic nonsense involving your past. Victoria nodded numbly, though her hands continued to shake as she reapplied her lipstick. Eleanor was right about one thing. She had to get through this evening. But how could she dance and smile and accept congratulations when her daughter was sitting 20 feet away, calling another woman Mama? I'll be out in just a moment, Victoria managed. Eleanor studied her reflection critically. See that you are. And Victoria? Whatever Richard Wellington is trying to prove by bringing that woman and child here tonight, don't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. You're a Hartwell now. Act like it. But as Eleanor left and Victoria stared at herself in the mirror, she realized it was too late for that advice. Her reaction had been immediate and unmistakable. Anyone paying attention would have seen the shock, the recognition, the devastation written across her face. Richard had won this round, but the game was far from over. 20 minutes later, Victoria emerged from the ladies' lounge with her composure reconstructed like a carefully built fortress. She'd retouched her makeup, adjusted her veil, and practiced her smile until it looked natural again. But inside, her heart hammered with the rhythm of a war drum. She made her way through the reception, accepting congratulations and air kisses with mechanical precision. But her destination was clear. Richard Wellington stood near the bar, watching Sophia play peekaboo with Maria around a decorative column. The sight of them together, her daughter giggling with abandon while Maria's face glowed with maternal love, sent another spike of pain through Victoria's chest. Richard. Her voice was steady, controlled. Might I have a word? He turned slowly, his dark eyes holding no surprise. He'd been expecting this confrontation. Of course. Congratulations on your marriage, by the way. Jonathan seems like a good man. Don't. The word came out like a whip crack. Don't you dare stand there making pleasantries after what you've done. What I've done? Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. I accepted your wedding invitation and brought guests. Isn't that what people do at social events? Victoria glanced around quickly, ensuring they weren't being overheard. Several guests were watching them with curious expressions, but the music and general party chatter provided enough cover for a discreet conversation. That child, she whispered fiercely. You know exactly who she is. Yes, I do. Richard's voice was quietly triumphant. Sophia Santos, 5 years old, loves finger painting and story time, calls Maria Mama, and means it with every fiber of her being. A remarkable little girl who deserves better than she's gotten from life so far. How long have you known? Victoria's carefully applied composure was beginning to crack again. Known what, specifically? Richard sipped his scotch with maddening calm. That she's your biological daughter? That you gave her up for adoption 6 years ago and told everyone you were studying art history in Florence? That the family emergency that broke up our engagement was actually your desperate attempt to hide your pregnancy from me and everyone else in our circle? Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. How could you possibly know all that? Richard's smile was sharp as a blade. "Because I hired the best private investigator money could buy after you disappeared on me. Because I needed to understand why the woman I loved suddenly became a stranger who couldn't bear to be in the same room with me. Because I deserved answers, Victoria, even if you weren't brave enough to give them to me." The words hit like physical blows. Victoria gripped the back of a nearby chair to steady herself. "So you've known for years that Sophia that she was mine?" "I've known since she was 3 months old." Richard's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more impact than a shout. "I've known since the day I saw Maria crying in my kitchen because the adoption agency had contacted her about taking in an emergency placement. A baby whose original adoptive family had backed out at the last minute due to financial problems." Victoria's knees nearly buckled. "You mean she wasn't? The adoption didn't go according to plan? The wealthy family you thought would give her every advantage. They declared bankruptcy 2 weeks after taking her home. The agency needed an emergency placement, and Maria had been on their list as a potential foster parent since she was 18. She'd been hoping to adopt someday when she could afford it. The irony was devastating. Victoria had given up her daughter to ensure she'd have the best life possible, only for Sophia to end up in the exact circumstances Victoria had been trying to avoid, with a single mother struggling to make ends meet. "So you've been watching her all this time," Victoria said, her voice hollow, "knowing she was mine, letting Maria raise her while I what?" Richard's facade of calm finally cracked, revealing the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. "While I gave Maria a job with health insurance so Sophia could see a doctor when she got sick, while I made sure they had a safe place to live and enough food on the table. While I watched your daughter grow up calling another woman Mama because her real mother was too concerned about her social standing to claim her." "That's not fair," Victoria whispered, but the words lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Richard stepped closer, his voice intense but still low enough to avoid drawing attention. "Tell me, Victoria, in the past 6 years, how many times have you wondered about her? How many nights have you lain awake thinking about whether she was safe, healthy, happy?" Victoria opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. The truth was too painful to speak aloud. She had wondered, especially in the quiet moments when Jonathan was working late and she was alone in their penthouse apartment. But she'd always pushed those thoughts away, convinced herself that not knowing was better than facing the reality of what she'd done. "I thought so," Richard said softly. "While you were building your new life and pretending the past never happened, Maria has been the mother Sophia deserved. And now you want to judge me for bringing them here, for giving you a chance to see the child you abandoned?" "I didn't abandon her," Victoria protested, but the words sounded weak even to her own ears. "I gave her up so she could have a better life." "Look around you, Victoria." Richard gestured toward Sophia, who was now sitting on Maria's lap, both of them laughing at something Jonathan had said as he'd wandered over to their table. "Does this look like abandonment to you? Or does it look like love?" Before Victoria could respond, Jonathan's voice cut through the tension. "There you are, darling," he approached with his characteristic easy smile, though his eyes showed concern. "I was beginning to think you'd run away from your own wedding reception." Victoria forced a bright smile that felt like it might shatter her face. "Just catching up with an old friend." Oh, but Jonathan's attention had shifted to Richard, and his expression grew more serious. "Mr. Wellington, thank you for coming tonight. I know this must be complicated for you." "Not complicated at all," Richard replied smoothly. "I wish you both every happiness." As Jonathan slipped his arm around Victoria's waist, she felt the weight of her new husband's touch like a chain. Everything she'd built with this good, kind man was founded on lies, and now those lies were sitting 20 feet away, playing with napkin rings and asking Maria for more chocolate cake. "We should probably start making our rounds." Jonathan said diplomatically. People will want to speak with the bride and groom. Victoria nodded, allowing herself to be led away, but not before Richard's final words followed her across the ballroom. Enjoy your new life, Victoria. Just remember, some choices can't be undone. As the reception continued around them, Maria found herself increasingly aware of the undercurrents flowing through the elegant ballroom. She'd noticed the bride's strange behavior during the ceremony, the way Victoria kept staring at Sophia with an expression that seemed to shift between wonder and pain. She'd seen the intense conversation between Richard and Victoria near the bar, their body language screaming conflict despite their careful whispers. Now, as Sophia dozed in her arms, overwhelmed by the late hour and rich food, Maria finally allowed herself to voice the questions that had been building all evening. "Mr. Wellington," she said quietly, as he returned to their table after his confrontation with Victoria. "I need to know what's really happening here." Richard's expression was unreadable as he settled into his chair, but Maria caught the way his hands trembled slightly as he loosened his bow tie. Whatever had just transpired with the bride had affected him deeply. "What do you mean?" "Don't," Maria said firmly, surprising herself with her boldness. "Don't treat me like I'm stupid. I've been watching people's faces all night. I've seen how they look at Sophia, how they whisper when they think we can't hear. And Victoria Sterling, the way she looked at my daughter during the ceremony, it was like she'd seen a ghost." Sophia stirred in Maria's arms, mumbling something about pretty dresses before settling back into sleep. Maria adjusted the child's position carefully, then fixed Richard with a stare that demanded honesty. "You've been acting strange for weeks. The sudden generosity with Sophia's medical bills, the expensive toys that just happened to show up. The way you insisted we come tonight even though it makes no sense." Maria's voice grew stronger with each word. "I may be your housekeeper, but I'm not blind. Tell me the truth about why we're here." Richard was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between Maria's determined face and Sophia's sleeping form. Around them, the reception continued in its glittering splendor, but their corner of the ballroom felt isolated, cocooned in tension. "Maria," he began carefully, "what do you remember about Sophia's adoption? About how she came to you?" The question caught Maria off guard. "I remember everything. The agency called on a Tuesday morning. Said they had an emergency placement, a baby whose adoptive family had fallen through due to financial problems. They needed someone immediately." Her voice softened as she remembered. She was so tiny, so scared. She'd been moved around too much already. "Do you remember what the caseworker told you about the birth mother?" Maria frowned, trying to recall details from 6 years ago. Young, unmarried, from a wealthy family. She wanted a closed adoption, no contact. The caseworker said she was very specific about wanting the baby to go to a financially stable family who could provide opportunities she couldn't. "And yet Sophia ended up with you," Richard said gently. "A single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet." The observation stung, even though Maria knew it wasn't meant as criticism. "I gave her love," she said defensively. "I gave her everything I had." "You gave her more than everything," Richard assured her quickly. "You gave her a childhood filled with laughter and bedtime stories and unconditional love. You've been an extraordinary mother, Maria. Better than she would have had with her biological family." "How would you know that?" The question slipped out before Maria could stop it, but once spoken, it hung in the air between them like a challenge. Richard sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his 55 years. "Because I know who her biological mother is." Maria's heart stopped. "What?" "I know because I've been paying for Sophia's expenses for the past 3 years, not out of generosity, Maria, but out of responsibility. Because her biological mother destroyed our relationship rather than tell me the truth about her pregnancy. because I've been watching from the sidelines as you raised the daughter of the woman I once planned to marry." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She looked around the ballroom with new eyes, taking in the elegance, the wealth, the carefully orchestrated perfection of it all. "You mean Victoria Sterling is Sophia's biological mother?" Richard confirmed quietly. "The year she told everyone she was studying abroad? She was hiding her pregnancy? The family emergency that broke us up? That was her going into labor and making the decision to give up Sophia." "Our?" Maria's voice was barely a whisper. Richard's face crumpled slightly. "I don't know for certain. The timing. It could be mine. Victoria disappeared before I could ask the right questions, and by the time I hired investigators to find the truth, she was already engaged to Jonathan. The adoption records were sealed. But I had enough information to piece together what happened." Maria stared down at Sophia's peaceful face, this child she'd loved and raised as her own, and tried to process the magnitude of what Richard was telling her. "So, you brought us here tonight because Victoria needed to see what her choices cost. Because Sophia deserved to be acknowledged by her biological mother, even if Victoria was too cowardly to seek her out herself. Because I needed Victoria to understand that walking away from responsibility doesn't make it disappear. It just transfers the burden to someone else." Tears stung Maria's eyes as the full weight of the situation settled over her. "And me? Where do I fit into your revenge scheme?" "This isn't about revenge," Richard said fiercely, leaning closer. "This is about truth. And you, Maria, you're the heart of this story. You're the woman who stepped up when Sophia needed a mother. You're the one who turned a tragedy into a blessing." "But I'm not her real mother," Maria whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Aren't you?" Richard's voice was gentle but insistent. "Who taught her to tie her shoes? Who stayed up all night when she had the flu? Who cheers the loudest at her school plays and helps her with homework and makes her favorite pancakes on Sunday mornings?" Maria's tears fell freely now, landing on Sophia's dark curls. "But if Victoria wants her back—" "Look around this room, Maria. Look at Victoria's new life, her new husband, her perfect society wedding. Do you really think there's room for a 5-year-old daughter in all this perfection? Do you think Victoria is ready to explain to her new in-laws that she has a child she never mentioned?" Maria looked across the ballroom to where Victoria stood next to her new husband, smiling for photographs with various dignitaries and society figures. Everything about the scene spoke of careful orchestration, of a life built on maintaining appearances. "She gave Sophia up once," Richard continued. "She made that choice when she had other options. You didn't choose Sophia out of convenience or social pressure. You chose her out of love. That makes you her real mother in every way that matters." Sophia stirred again, blinking sleepy eyes up at Maria. "Mama, can we go home soon? I'm tired." "Soon, baby," Maria whispered, pressing a kiss to Sophia's forehead. "We'll go home soon." But as she held her daughter close and watched Victoria Sterling Hartwell navigate her perfect wedding reception, Maria wondered if home would ever feel the same again. The evening was winding down when Jonathan Hartwell made a discovery that would shatter everything. He'd retreated to the hotel manager's office to take an important business call from Tokyo, but as he prepared to rejoin the reception, he overheard a conversation between two society matrons in the hallway outside. "Did you see Victoria's face when she saw that child?" Margaret Whitmore whispered to her companion. "I thought she was going to faint right there during the father-daughter dance." "Well, can you blame her?" replied Cecilia Vanderberg. "The resemblance is quite striking. Those eyes, that smile, it's almost like looking at Victoria as a child." "You don't suppose?" Margaret's voice dropped even lower. "Oh, I more than suppose. I remember when Victoria disappeared for that year. Studying abroad, they said. But I always wondered, A young woman doesn't just vanish from society without reason. Jonathan's blood ran cold as the pieces clicked into place. He remembered Victoria's mysterious year in Europe, how she'd returned different somehow, more guarded, more anxious about commitment. He remembered how she'd always changed the subject when he asked about having children, claiming she wanted to wait, to focus on her career first. He'd attributed it to modern women wanting to establish themselves professionally. Now, staring through the office doorway at the reception beyond, he began to understand the real reason for her reluctance. When Jonathan returned to the ballroom, his practiced smile felt like it was carved from ice. He found Victoria posing for more photographs with his grandmother's vintage pearls catching the light, every inch the perfect society bride. "Darling," he said, slipping his arm around her waist, "could I steal you away for a moment? There's something I need to discuss with you." Victoria's smile faltered slightly at his tone, but she nodded graciously to the photographer. "Of course. Just give us one moment to freshen up." Jonathan guided her toward a quiet alcove near the ballroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, away from the lingering guests and cleanup crews. The city sparkled below them, but the romantic view felt mocking now. "Jonathan, what's wrong? You look—" "Tell me about your year in Florence," he said quietly. Victoria's face went white. "What about it? Tell me about what you were really doing there, because I'm beginning to suspect it wasn't studying Renaissance art." Victoria's hands began to tremble, and she clasped them together to hide the shaking. "I don't know what you mean." "That little girl with Richard Wellington," Jonathan continued, his voice still calm, but with an edge that spoke of barely controlled emotion. "She has your eyes, Victoria, your exact eyes. And suddenly your mysterious year abroad, your reluctance to discuss children, your panic attacks whenever we visit the pediatric wing at the hospital fundraisers, it all makes perfect sense." "Jonathan, please—" "How old is she?" he asked. 5, 6? That would put her conception right around the time you disappeared on Richard, wouldn't it?" Victoria sank into a nearby chair, her elaborate wedding dress pooling around her like spilled cream. "I can explain. Can you?" Jonathan's careful composure finally cracked. "Can you explain why you married me without telling me you had a daughter? Can you explain why I just spent the most important day of my life celebrating with a woman who's been lying to me for 3 years?" "I was going to tell you," Victoria whispered, tears streaming down her face and ruining her carefully applied makeup. I needed the right time." "The right time?" Jonathan's voice rose slightly before he caught himself and glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "Victoria, we've been planning this wedding for 18 months. We've talked about our future, about the children we might have together. When exactly was the right time to mention you already had one?" "She's not part of my life anymore," Victoria said desperately. "I gave her up. I made that choice years ago because I wasn't ready to be a mother." "It has nothing to do with us, with our marriage." Jonathan stared at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "It has everything to do with our marriage. You lied to me, Victoria, about something fundamental. How am I supposed to trust anything else you've told me?" "Because I love you," Victoria pleaded, "because I chose you. I chose this life, this future. What happened before doesn't just disappear because it's inconvenient," Jonathan said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "That little girl is your daughter, Victoria, our stepdaughter, part of our family, whether you acknowledge her or not." "She has a family," Victoria protested. "That woman, Maria, she's been raising her. Sophia doesn't even know I exist." "Sophia," Jonathan repeated the name softly. "Her name is Sophia." Victoria nodded miserably. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with a sadness that cut deeper than anger. "My grandmother used to tell me that you can judge a person's character by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. A child you gave birth to who shares your blood. How could you just walk away from that? I was 26 and scared and alone, Victoria cried. Richard had already started pulling away from me, and I knew he'd see a pregnancy as a trap, a way to force him into marriage. I thought I was doing the right thing. But you didn't give Richard a choice, did you? You made the decision for both of you, just like you made the decision for me by not telling me the truth. Victoria reached for his hands, but Jonathan stepped back, creating distance between them that felt infinite. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Jonathan looked back toward the ballroom, where Sophia was now awake again, sitting on Maria's lap and pointing excitedly at the crystal chandelier above them. Even from this distance, he could see the resemblance to Victoria that everyone had been whispering about all evening. "I'm saying I need time to think. I'm saying this changes everything, and I don't know how to process it all. Jonathan, please, it's our wedding night. Don't let Richard Wellington destroy what we have." "Richard didn't destroy anything," Jonathan said quietly. "You did that 6 years ago when you decided that lies were easier than truth. He just made sure the truth finally came to light." As if summoned by their conversation, Richard appeared in the alcove, his expression serious. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I thought you should know. The press has noticed the family resemblance. Someone's already posted photos online comparing Victoria's engagement pictures to recent shots of Sophia. It's starting to trend on social media." Victoria buried her face in her hands. "Oh God! The story's going to break, whether we control it or not," Richard continued. "I suggest we get ahead of it before the gossip columns turn this into something even more sensational." Jonathan looked between his new wife and her ex-fiancé, suddenly understanding that this confrontation had been orchestrated from the beginning. "You planned this, both of you. This whole evening was designed to force the truth into the open." "I planned to give Sophia a chance to be acknowledged," Richard corrected, "and to show Victoria what she walked away from. What happens next is up to all of you." But as Jonathan looked at Victoria's tear-stained face, and then toward the ballroom where an innocent 5-year-old was completely unaware that her entire world was about to change, he realized that some choices once made couldn't be undone. The perfect society wedding was about to become the scandal of the decade. The aftermath unfolded swiftly and mercilessly. By midnight, Psych Victoria Sterling's secret was trending across 3 social media platforms, with side-by-side photos of the bride and the mysterious little girl who'd accompanied Richard Wellington to the wedding. Society bloggers worked overtime, connecting dots and crafting narratives that grew more dramatic with each retelling. In the hotel's presidential suite that should have been filled with wedding night romance, Victoria sat still as a statue while Jonathan paced near the windows, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. "The Hartwell family publicist is fielding calls from 6 major news outlets," he said without turning around. "My mother is having what she's calling the vapors, and my father is threatening to have the marriage annulled on grounds of fraud." Victoria winced. "Can they do that? Legally? Probably not, but they can make our lives hell trying." Jonathan finally faced her, his expression exhausted. "Victoria, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about Sophia, about Maria, about the life that little girl has known for the past 6 years. What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you're my wife, then Sophia is my stepdaughter. Whether you've acknowledged her or not, whether you've been part of her life or not. That's reality now." Victoria's hands twisted in her lap. "But she doesn't know. She thinks Maria is her mother. And maybe that's for the best," Jonathan said quietly. "Maybe the kindest thing would be to let them continue their life without disruption. But that choice is about to be taken away from all of us." As if to emphasize his point, Jonathan's phone buzzed with another call. This time, it was his lawyer. Jonathan, we have a problem, came the voice through the speakerphone. Someone leaked more than just photos. They have documentation, birth certificates, adoption records, everything. The whole story is about to break in the morning edition of the Chronicle. Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. How is that possible? Those records were sealed. Money talks, Jonathan's lawyer replied grimly. And apparently someone thought this story was worth enough to pay for illegal access to confidential documents. After the call ended, the suite fell into heavy silence. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice barely audible. What do we do now? Now. Jonathan sat down across from her, suddenly looking older than his 38 years. Now we deal with the consequences of choices that were made long before tonight. And we figure out how to protect an innocent little girl from becoming collateral damage in a media circus. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in a much more modest room, Maria sat on the edge of the bed, watching Sophia sleep. The child had been so excited about the fancy party that she'd chatted about princess dresses and crystal chandeliers all the way back to the hotel. Richard had arranged for their rooms, insisting they stay the night rather than make the drive back to Connecticut. At the time, Maria had thought it was simple courtesy. Now she wondered if he'd known what was coming. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Richard standing in the hallway, still in his tuxedo, but looking disheveled and weary. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I'm sorry for everything that's about to happen." Maria stepped into the hallway, pulling the door closed quietly behind her. "The story's going public, isn't it?" Richard nodded. "By morning, everyone will know. About Victoria, about Sophia's adoption, about all of it." "And Sophia?" Maria's voice broke slightly. "How do I explain to a 5-year-old that her entire world is about to change?" "Maybe it doesn't have to change," Richard said carefully. "You're her mother, Maria. That's not going to change because of some newspaper story or DNA test. You're the one who's been there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every moment that mattered. But now Victoria knows where she is. Now everyone knows." Maria leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of exhaustion and fear settling over her. What if she wants her back? What if she decides being a mother is worth the inconvenience now that the secret's out anyway? "Then we fight," Richard said firmly. "We fight for Sophia's right to stay with the only mother she's ever known. We fight for stability over chaos, love over obligation." Maria looked up at him, seeing something in his expression that made her heart skip. "We." "Maria," Richard said softly, stepping closer. "I should have told you this years ago, but I've been in love with you since Sophia's second Christmas. When you made that gingerbread house that looked more like a gingerbread disaster and laughed so hard at your own failure that Sophia couldn't stop giggling." The confession hung between them in the quiet hallway, adding another layer of complexity to an already impossible situation. "You love me," Maria whispered. "I love both of you," Richard confirmed. "I love the way you sing off-key while you're cleaning. I love how you read Sophia the same bedtime story 3 times because she asks so nicely. I love that you've made my house feel like a home for the first time in my adult life." Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks. "Richard, I know the timing is terrible," he continued. "I know everything is complicated and messy and about to get worse, but I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever Victoria decides, whatever the media does to our lives, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Behind the door, Sophia stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about dancing with the prince. The innocent sound reminded them both of what was really at stake. "She's going to have questions," Maria said. "When the story breaks, when people start talking, she's going to want to know why everyone's suddenly interested in her." "Then we'll answer them," Richard said. "Together, age-appropriately, honestly, but together." Maria nodded. though her heart felt like it might shatter from the weight of uncertainty. In less than 12 hours, the quiet life she'd built with Sophia would be splashed across tabloids and social media. The little girl sleeping peacefully in the hotel room would wake up to a world where strangers felt entitled to opinions about her family. But as Richard took her hand in his, Maria felt something else alongside the fear: hope. Whatever storm was coming, she wouldn't face it alone. The perfect society wedding had ended. Now the real story could begin. 6 months later, the media storm had settled into the kind of background noise that New York society eventually absorbs and moves past. The initial headlines: Society Bride's Secret Daughter, Wedding Shocker Rocks Elite Wedding, had given way to new scandals and fresher gossip. But for the people at the center of the story, the real work of rebuilding their lives was just beginning. Maria stood in the kitchen of Richard's Connecticut home, their home now, watching Sophia help him make pancakes on a crisp Saturday morning in March. The little girl stood on her favorite step stool, carefully measuring flour while Richard guided her small hands, both of them covered in a fine dusting of ingredients. "Mama, look, I'm making Mickey Mouse pancakes," Sophia announced proudly, holding up a lumpy circle of batter that looked nothing like the famous cartoon character. "They're perfect, sweetheart," Maria laughed, her heart full as she watched the easy interaction between her daughter and the man who had become so much more than an employer. The transition hadn't been seamless. Those first weeks after the wedding had been a nightmare of photographers camping outside their apartment, reporters calling at all hours, and well-meaning neighbors asking intrusive questions. Sophia had been confused and frightened by the sudden attention, clinging to Maria and asking why strangers wanted to take her picture. Richard had moved them into his home immediately, hiring security and ensuring Sophia could continue attending her kindergarten classes without disruption. He'd also done something that surprised everyone. He'd filed formal adoption papers asking to become Sophia's legal father. Not to replace anyone, he'd explained to the family court judge, but to give her the stability and protection of knowing she's wanted, claimed, and legally secure. The adoption had been finalized just 2 weeks ago, making Sophia officially Sophia Santos Wellington, though she simply called herself Sophia and considered both Maria and Richard her parents in the most natural way possible. They'd told her the truth, of course, age-appropriately, gently, but honestly. Dr. Sarah Chen, the child psychologist Richard had hired, had helped them navigate those difficult conversations. "Some children have tummy mummies and heart mummies," they'd explained. "Your tummy mummy carried you when you were tiny, but your heart mummy, that's me, has loved you every day since you were a baby." Sophia had processed this information with the remarkable resilience of childhood, asking practical questions like whether her tummy mummy liked pancakes too, and whether she had the same middle name. She didn't. But mostly, Sophia seemed secure in the knowledge that Maria and Richard were her family, the people who would always be there for bedtime stories and scraped knees and everything in between. The doorbell rang, interrupting Maria's thoughts. Through the window, she saw a familiar figure standing on the front steps, Victoria Sterling Hartwell, looking nervous and holding what appeared to be a gift bag. "I'll get it," Maria said quietly, exchanging a meaningful look with Richard. They'd been expecting this visit, though not necessarily today. Maria opened the door to find Victoria looking polished but tired, her usual perfect composure replaced by something more genuine and vulnerable. The past 6 months had changed her too. There were new lines around her eyes, and her smile seemed more tentative. "Hello, Maria. Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Come in," Maria said, stepping aside. "Sophia's in the kitchen with Richard." Victoria hesitated in the entryway, suddenly looking young and uncertain. "Is she? Does she know I'm coming?" "We told her that her birth mother wanted to meet her," Maria said carefully. We've been preparing her for this possibility, helping her understand that it's okay to be curious about you, and it's also okay if she's not ready. They walked toward the kitchen, where Sophia's laughter rang out as Richard attempted to flip a pancake and failed spectacularly, sending it sliding across the counter instead of back into the pan. "Daddy Richard, you're silly," Sophia giggled. Using the name she'd started calling him after the adoption was finalized. Victoria stopped dead in the doorway, her breath catching at the sight of her biological daughter. 6 months of seeing photos in newspapers and magazines hadn't prepared her for the reality of Sophia in person. The animated gestures, the bright smile, the complete comfort and security she radiated in this warm kitchen. "Sophia," Maria said gently, "this is Victoria. Remember we talked about her?" Sophia looked up from her pancake project, studying Victoria with the frank curiosity of a 6-year-old. "Are you my tummy mommy?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she managed to nod. "Yes. Sweetheart, I am." "Do you like pancakes?" Sophia asked, which made Richard hide a smile behind his coffee mug. "I do," Victoria answered, her voice slightly hoarse with emotion. "Good, because Daddy Richard makes terrible ones, but Mama lets us eat them anyway because she says cooking is about love, not skill." The innocent comment broke through some of the tension in the room, and Victoria actually smiled. A real smile, not her practiced society version. "Would you like to sit with us while we eat breakfast?" Maria offered, though every maternal instinct in her body screamed warnings about letting Victoria get too close. But over the past months, through extensive therapy and soul-searching, Maria had come to understand something important. Sophia's emotional security came from knowing she was loved and wanted, not from hiding the truth or pretending Victoria didn't exist. They sat around the kitchen island, an awkward but necessary gathering. Sophia chatted about school and her friend Emma and the butterfly garden she was helping Richard plant in the backyard. Victoria listened with rapt attention, asking gentle questions and seeming genuinely interested in every detail. "I brought you something," Victoria said, eventually retrieving the gift bag. "It's a photo album. Pictures of me when I was your age and some of your grandparents, my parents. I thought you might like to see where you got your eyes." Sophia accepted the album with the solemnity children reserve for truly important moments. She flipped through the pages slowly, stopping at a photo of young Victoria blowing out birthday candles. "You look just like me," Sophia exclaimed with delight. "I was thinking the same thing," Victoria said softly. After breakfast, the adults moved to the living room, while Sophia played in her toy corner, seemingly unfazed by the emotional undercurrents surrounding her. "How are things with Jonathan?" Richard asked. The first time he'd addressed Victoria directly since her arrival. Victoria's face tightened slightly. "We're working through things. Marriage counseling, individual therapy. He's a good man, and he's trying to understand my choices, but trust takes time to rebuild." "And do you want it rebuilt?" Maria asked, surprising herself with her directness. Victoria was quiet for a moment, watching Sophia arrange her dolls in an elaborate tea party setup. "I want to be worthy of it," she said finally. "I want to be the kind of person who deserves second chances, who can admit her mistakes and do better." She turned to Maria with an expression of profound regret. "I owe you an apology that I can never adequately express. You stepped up when I stepped away. You gave Sophia everything I was too scared and selfish to provide. You've been her real mother in every way that matters." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. "She's lucky to have people who love her, all of us. I don't want to disrupt her life." Victoria continued, "I can see how happy she is, how secure. I'm not asking for custody or shared time or anything that would confuse her. I'm asking for permission to be part of her story, maybe birthday cards or occasional visits like this one. A way for her to know that giving her up wasn't about not loving her. It was about not being ready to love her properly. Richard leaned forward. What about your social standing, your reputation? Being publicly connected to Sophia will always be part of your story now. Victoria's smile was rueful. Was funny how much less that matters when you're facing the possibility of losing everything that actually counts. Jonathan made me realize that hiding Sophia's existence didn't protect anyone. It just perpetuated the lie that she was something to be ashamed of. And are you ashamed of her? Maria asked quietly. Never, Victoria said immediately, with more conviction than she'd shown all morning. I'm ashamed of myself, of my choices, of the years I wasted pretending she didn't exist. But Sophia, she's perfect. And she's perfect because of you, Maria, because you loved her when I couldn't. From the toy corner came Sophia's voice. Mama, can Victoria come to my dance recital next week? Miss Jenny says we can invite special people. The adults exchanged glances, and Maria made a decision that came from her heart rather than her fears. If Victoria would like to come, and if she promises to follow our lead about how much attention is appropriate, then yes, she can come. Victoria's face lit up with gratitude and joy. I would love that more than anything. Later that afternoon, after Victoria had left with promises to call before the recital and to always respect Maria and Richard's role as Sophia's parents, the three of them sat in the garden watching Sophia chase butterflies among the flowers they'd planted together. Are you okay with all this? Richard asked Maria, taking her hand in his. Maria considered the question seriously. The old Maria, the one who'd been so afraid of losing Sophia that she'd barely been able to function during those first weeks after the wedding, might have said no. But therapy, love, and time had taught her something valuable about security. I think so, she said. Sophia, knowing Victoria doesn't make me less her mother. It just makes her story more complete. And us? Richard asked, his voice holding the vulnerability of a man who'd learned that love required courage. Are you okay with us? Maria looked at this man who'd protected them, fought for them, and loved them through the chaos of the past year. Richard, who'd read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, who'd learned to braid Sophia's hair for school, who'd made their little family official in every way that mattered. More than okay, she said, leaning against his shoulder. We're exactly what we were always meant to be. Sophia came running over, breathless and grass-stained, throwing herself into Maria's lap with the complete trust of a child who'd never doubted she was loved. Mama, Daddy Richard, look what I found! She held up a particularly beautiful butterfly that had landed on her finger. Do you think it's magical? Absolutely, Richard said seriously. The best kind of magic there is. What kind is that? Sophia asked. Maria and Richard exchanged a look full of understanding and gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. The kind that brings families together, Maria said, pressing a kiss to Sophia's dark curls, the kind that makes everything right in the end. As the butterfly took flight and Sophia ran off to find more garden treasures, Maria reflected on how profoundly their lives had changed since that Tuesday morning when Richard had asked her to sit down in his office. She'd said yes to attending a wedding, not knowing she was really saying yes to love, to truth, to the kind of family that's built on choice rather than just circumstance. Victoria Sterling had given Sophia life, but Maria Santos had given her a childhood filled with love and laughter and security. Richard Wellington had given them both a future filled with possibility and protection. And Sophia had given them all the gift of understanding what family really means. It doesn't come from sharing the same blood or the same last name. It doesn't come from perfect choices or flawless people. It comes from showing up day after day with love and commitment and the willingness to put someone else's needs before your own. That evening, as Maria tucked Sophia into bed in the room Richard had lovingly decorated with princess themes and educational posters, Sophia asked the question that had been building all day. "Mama, am I lucky or unlucky to have so many people who love me?" Maria smiled, understanding that her daughter was trying to process the complexity of her unique situation. A birth mother who was learning to love from a distance, and the parents who loved her every single day. Lucky, baby. Very, very lucky. Most children have one family that loves them. You have multiple families that love you in different ways. That's not confusing, that's abundance. Like having extra scoops of ice cream. Exactly like that, Maria laughed. Extra scoops of love. As Sophia drifted off to sleep, Maria stood in the doorway feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. The perfect society wedding that was supposed to showcase Victoria Sterling's new life had instead revealed the truth about what really mattered. Not appearances or social standing or keeping uncomfortable secrets buried. What mattered was showing up for the people you love. What mattered was choosing family based on love rather than obligation. What mattered was understanding that the best stories don't always have perfect beginnings, but they can have beautiful endings if enough people are willing to fight for them. Outside, spring rain began to fall gently on the garden where they'd planted new life together, washing the earth clean and nourishing the roots of everything they'd built. Inside, the house settled into peaceful quiet, filled with the contentment that comes from knowing that every person within its walls was exactly where they belonged. The wedding had ended in scandal, but the real love story was just beginning.